Tonight on Currents News, Catholic schools in New York are taking a big hit as the coronavirus crisis ravages our daily lives.
6 Catholic academies in the Diocese of Brooklyn will permanently close their doors. I'm Emily Drewby, and I'll explain how it's connected to the pandemic.
Taking a swing at helping the Brooklyn Diocese. I'm Jessica Easthope, and that's what more than 100 golfers are doing at the 25th annual Bishop DiMarzio Golf Classic.
President Trump wants to keep his tax returns secret. The Supreme Court has decided if he can. Plus, Painting Day on Fifth Avenue, right outside the Trump Tower. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Now the coronavirus is turning its ugly devastation on the Catholic schools in New York City. More than 24 are shutting down. Parents suffering through the crisis that's crushed so many jobs aren't enrolling their kids for the next school year. Currents News' Emily Drewby has the story.
For 12 years, Father Joseph Gibino has walked the halls of Holy Trinity Catholic Academy in Whitestone, Queens. Now, the school is closing.
It's always a very sad moment for the entire church.
Holy Trinity in Whitestone is one of the 6 Catholic academies in the Diocese of Brooklyn permanently closing on August 31st, 2020, including Queen of the Rosary in Williamsburg, St. Gregory the Great in Crown Heights, Flatbush, Our Lady's Catholic Academy in South Ozone Park, Our Lady of Grace in Howard Beach, and St. Mel's in Whitestone. The schools were already suffering from a decline in enrollment and budget problems, made much worse by the pandemic.
We took another hit, both in terms of finances, with families losing livelihoods, and then the decision to move out of New York. It has been really a very trying time for us.
The loss of fundraisers hurt the schools too.
It was just the final factor.
There's over $630,000 in unpaid tuition bills from this school year between the 6 schools. Thomas Chadzuko, superintendent of schools, says it's money many families can't afford to pay.
I think it's an unfair ask, especially if families need to put food on their table, but we still have to pay the teachers, pay the bills, and it's something that we may never materialize.
The Archdiocese of New York was also hard hit, blaming COVID-19 for the closure of 20 of their schools. Cardinal Timothy Dolan said, quote, "Too many have lost parents and grandparents to this insidious virus, and now thousands will not see their beloved school again." The Archdiocese will also merge 3 of their schools. The change will affect 2,500 students and 350 staff. Massive unemployment and health concerns aren't just an issue in New York. It's a trend across the country. The National Catholic Educational Association tracking at least 89 permanent Catholic school closures credited to COVID-19, not counting today's announcements.
I'm more hopeful, not that I wanted to see 6 schools shutter their doors at the end of August, but I think hopefully we can come back to more of stability as we move into the future.
Back here in Brooklyn, Chadzuko says they're doing everything in their power to help keep these kids in Catholic academies, offering grants and holding meetings to help families affected by the closures. In Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
A hotline is being set up for parents who need help or any information. The number is 718-965-7380. You can also go to catholicschoolsbq.org for the latest updates. We'll repeat this information again at the end of the newscast. The diocese is offering financial help so kids can benefit from a Catholic education. Futuresineducation.org is where families can apply for scholarships to help out with tuition. And you can help too by making a donation to Futures. We'll repeat this web address at the end of the newscast. The pandemic is keeping all classrooms in the Diocese of Brooklyn closed for now. But what's in store for the new academic year this fall? Emily asked School Superintendent Chadzuko about that.
We've put together a 5-part plan, which we sent out to all of our principals and board chairs yesterday in anticipation of the reopening. We're really looking to a full 100% opening of our Catholic academies and parish schools. Obviously maintaining the social distancing, the health and safety of all the schools. We also plan to launch on Monday a 6-week set of letters to the parents highlighting what we're preparing for September. And we're also asking each Catholic Academy and parish school to post on their websites what they are doing in preparation for September.
These plans will depend on what comes down from Governor Andrew Cuomo and what he orders about reopening schools. The pandemic is forcing many families in the Diocese of Brooklyn to struggle. They are out of work and it's tough to get food for their tables. Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens is making a big difference, distributing over 500,000 free meals so far. Today, they're getting a big boost thanks to Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story from the golf course where it's all happening.
The Bishop DiMarzio Golf Classic looks very different than the event has in years past, in that before you get checked in, something else needs to be checked: your temperature.
You're good. Okay, you're perfect.
A temperature check and a COVID-19 waiver, two of the many precautions driving home the importance of safety at the 25th Annual Golf Classic at the North Hills Country Club in Manhasset. Vincent LEVIEN is the Director of External Affairs for DESALES Media Group, Currents News parent company. LEVIEN also leads the DESALES Media Emergency Task Force, which was honored at the Golf Classic for its work during the pandemic.
We worked night and day, literally 3 months straight, in helping Catholic Charities and helping all the hospitals and the firefighters and the police officers.
The diocese had heroes of its own in the task force. LEVIEN says the work is just par for the course.
The emergency task force team that literally risked their life every day for me and for the church to help the most in need. And I think it shows what the Catholic Church is all about.
This year, all proceeds from the golf outing are going to a cause that hits close to home for everyone in the Brooklyn Diocese.
You see the despair in the person's eyes as we do these pop-up food pantries. We actually give food out to different people from around our communities.
Former State Senator Marty Golden, the Vice President of Development and Fundraising for Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens, says the fundraiser is a hole-in-one for the organization that has given out more than 500,000 meals to those in need.
This money is going to be spent wisely, and it couldn't come at a better time.
$100,000 was raised at the 25th Annual Bishop DiMarzio Golf Classic, and it's all going to help Catholic Charities continue its COVID-19 relief efforts. In Manhasset, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens website, ccbq.org, is where to go to get the latest information about food assistance. It's also the place where you can volunteer or make a donation to help out. That's ccbq.org. The COVID crisis is also putting the squeeze on New Yorkers who rent their homes. That's about 2/3 of the city's residents, and a quarter of them haven't paid rent since March, according to new numbers. State law prohibits evictions of any tenants facing financial hardships while social distancing rules are in effect. Now, landlords are becoming delinquent in property tax payments, and City Hall is bracing for a huge shortfall. In other parts of the country, the virus is spreading like wildfire. That's sparking a crisis over hospital beds and new calls for some states to shut down again as more people lose their jobs. Camila Bernal has the story.
More than 3 million confirmed COVID-19 cases in the U.S. alone, and some hospitals running out of ICU capacity.
So this is an outbreak that's uncontained in pre-fall.
The rate of new cases is increasing in at least 35 states, including some that have already had weeks of shutdowns. Dr. Anthony Fauci highlighting the gravity of the issue when speaking to the Wall Street Journal.
Any state that is having a serious problem, that state should seriously look at shutting down.
But doing so could add to the nearly 20 million people currently receiving assistance through unemployment, including 1.3 million people who filed just last week. Because even as millions return to work, many others still can't. Closed schools and childcare facilities a huge contributing factor.
I want to get our kids back in in-person instruction, but we can't do it if it's not safe to.
And despite pushback from President Trump, the CDC director says the agency is holding firm to critical guidelines it set to safely return students to the classroom.
So our guidelines are our guidelines.
Concern over the well-being of students and overall health weighing heavily on the next steps.
The public health of the students of this nation is best served by getting these schools reopened.
Camila Bernal, Currents News.
The Supreme Court issued 2 rulings on President Trump's taxes. The High Court ruled 7-2 that Manhattan DA Cyrus Vance can issue a subpoena to get the president's tax returns as part of an investigation. But it also ruled that Congress cannot get the information and sent the case back to lower courts. President Trump on Twitter called it a political prosecution. The president also isn't happy about a new mural being painted in front of Trump Tower. Painters got to work today on a Black Lives Matter mural on Fifth Avenue. Mayor Bill de Blasio picked the location himself, saying black people built Fifth Avenue and much of the nation, and the mural is to honor them. Earlier this month, President Trump called the mural a, quote, symbol of hate that he says will further antagonize New York's finest. There's a lot more news headed your way. We're not the only ones losing our Catholic schools because of the pandemic. We'll show you where else they're shutting down. Plus, instead of prayer, a protest at Notre Dame Cathedral. We'll tell you why people were demonstrating. And prison reform is still a hot topic. We'll get some inside information from a woman who spent 14 years working in one. Stay with us.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
More now on our top story. Catholic schools in the grip of the coronavirus shutting their doors. The history of school closures in the U.S. dates back to long before the pandemic. Catholic schools have a proven track record of educating their kids who get higher test scores than public school students. Still, the number of Catholic schools in the United States has been dwindling for more than 50 years. In the 1960s, some 5.2 million students were enrolled in almost 13,000 schools across the nation. 30 years later, that number dropped by half, 2.5 million students in 8,700 schools. Now, Catholic schools educate about 1.7 million kids in about 6,100 schools. And the closures are not only happening in America. Catholic schools in Italy are also shutting down. At the root of the current crisis, declining enrollment. With so many jobs lost to the pandemic, parents are cutting school tuition out of the family budget. Melissa Butts is in Rome with the story of what's happening there and here.
Permanently empty classrooms like these are the new reality for at least 98 private schools in the United States who are being forced to close due to coronavirus. A decline in enrollment is to blame. With the COVID-19 pandemic still spreading in the U.S., the number of students who can no longer afford a Catholic education could accelerate. The outbreak has destroyed millions of American jobs. In many cases, parents can't pay their kids' tuition, which averages about $5,000 for elementary schools and $12,000 for secondary education. The National Catholic Educational Association is warning that without help from the government, the challenges facing Catholic education will get worse.
Many middle-income families are no longer able to afford the tuition. In the United States, there is no government assistance for operating religious and private schools. Education dollars supported by the public go only to public schools.
While Catholic schools are facing big challenges across the United States, here in Italy, there's also trouble. Father Jesus Pareño, the director of Highlands Institute, a Catholic school in Rome, says so far this year, 66 Italian Catholic schools have closed.
It's a very delicate situation for schools that want to stay open and don't want to close. We would like to give more economic support to families, but it's just not possible.
Father Jesus recalls that throughout history, Catholics have provided an education full of rigor, diversity, service programs, sports, and most of all, faith. As a priest and private school director, he said Catholic school closures and a resulting lack in faith formation could have lasting negative effects for upcoming generations and the church at large. In the United States, for the past 10 years, enrollment has decreased by 18% in private schools just like these. And in fact, 1,200 of these schools had to either close or combine with other ones. Only 244 new private schools were created. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
In Paris, a protest at the rebuilding of the famed Notre Dame Cathedral. Greenpeace activists hung banners from a huge construction crane atop the landmark church, almost 300 feet high. The message accused France's president of not doing enough about climate change. Notre Dame is under reconstruction after a devastating fire last year and is off limits to the public. In Trenton, New Jersey, a Christopher Columbus statue is coming down by order of the mayor. Crews are already working to remove the monument, which has stood in Columbus Park for 60 years. The mayor says it's going into storage and the park renamed. Local Italian-American leaders are calling the move a political stunt. In the Big Apple, the famed Columbus statue standing tall in the circle that bears his name isn't going anywhere. It's protected under preservation laws on the state and national levels. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo is insisting the statue stay right where it is in Columbus Circle, pointing to its importance in the Italian-American community. Prison reform is one of the issues at the heart of our nation's current conversation regarding race relations in America. Valerie Schultz has some inside information on that. She spent 14 years working in a prison library and wrote a book about the experience called Overdue, a Dewey Decimal System of Grace. And Valerie, first, what did you learn about the prison system while you were working there?
Well, the system in general has a whole lot of problems, mostly having to do with, I think, who goes to prison. It's a very sort of skewed population of people who don't have the resources, especially for legal representation, who end up doing more prison time than probably equally guilty people who have more resources and better representation.
What do you think is the role of prisons in our society? Is it retribution, deterrence? Is it rehabilitation?
We had a saying when I worked there that today's inmate is tomorrow's neighbor, because most inmates are released from prison at some point. And so I firmly believe that rehabilitation is the only sane way to design our prison systems. We want to give people tools to rejoin society. We want to have them not keep coming back. There's a real revolving door with a lot of inmates. And so the more tools we can give them, and I also think the more compassion we show them and humanity, it makes a difference when they are released, and it's better for all of society.
Okay, prison reform is a big issue in the Black Lives Matter movement. There have been calls for better living conditions for prisoners, decreasing levels of mass incarceration, lessening the harshness of certain drug laws. Have you seen any improvements in those areas?
Yes, actually, during the time I worked in the California state system, a lot of reforms happened. Many of these were because they were under a federal mandate to reduce the population because of overcrowding. So they found kind of more humane parole boards to give people a chance to parole. They introduced a lot of educational and vocational programs. I got to see the beginning of face-to-face college courses in prison, which was just a revelation for a lot of these guys. And those are just some of the things that help instead of hurt our end goal, which is to have people rejoin society.
Right. And what about bail reform? New laws took effect in New York City last year that are now being rolled back. Then the pandemic happened, and they released a lot of accused offenders out into the streets. Just this weekend, we saw a lot of violence in New York City. What do you think about bail reform?
I think many people spend way more time in jail than they should before they're even tried, just because when they're charged with something, their families can't afford the bail. And so once again, it's skewed towards people who can come up with the money to spring their loved ones from jail before they're ever even tried or before they plead to anything. And so I really believe that cash bail is a terrible system, and I'm glad to see it going by the wayside.
So if you could make one reform of the prison system, what would it be?
You know, it's kind of a vague concept, but I think changing the culture inside prisons. And that's especially, staff, free staff and correctional officers, that instead of feeling like we're doing some good, a lot of times we treat other people as less than human, refer to them as animals, or, that kind of idea I think is so destructive to all people, the people treating people that way, and of course the people who are being treated that way. It doesn't do any good at all. And I think there is a real shift in culture coming, but it takes time.
All right, Valerie Schultz, thanks for lending your insight on this.
Thanks for having me.
Still to come on Currents News, a daring rescue as a police officer runs into a fire to save a child. We have the video coming up next. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. And finally tonight, a Texas police officer runs into a burning home to rescue a child, and it was all caught on camera.
All of a sudden I see this small cloud of gray smoke just come up and caught my attention. Then all of a sudden, right after it, followed this big cloud of black smoke.
CRISTOBAL MARIN says his first instinct was to try to help, but the street was blocked by a police officer's car.
What caught my attention instantly, and I'm getting this on film, is there's a police officer that came out right behind the flames.
No one was in the trailer home engulfed in flames, but the home next door, close enough to get scorched, was occupied.
It was well within my heart and my soul to run in and try and get those people out. The first thing I heard was an elderly woman in there and a child.
SOCORRO police officer Joshua Gonzalez says his mind was racing 100 miles an hour.
When I arrived to the door, it was really hot. And once I made entry, I did find that there was 2 adults inside and a child. The child, he was 8 years of age.
Gonzalez says he grabbed the child and ran out while an off-duty firefighter rescued the woman as well.
We have to see that there's still good in humanity, good in people.
During a time when there's tension between police and some groups, the police chief says,
what this shows is that the officers, that really doesn't affect them. They're out there on a daily basis. They're out there doing their job.
No matter how we're portrayed, each and every officer has a heart. We do have the initiative to help out everybody. We're not bad people. We're here to, help out the community.
The officer says the boy told him he was sad his football cleats were lost in the fire, so he offered to buy him new ones. And that is Currents News. Before we go, here again is that information about the schools. A hotline is being set up for parents who need help or have questions. The number is 718-965-7380. You can also go to CatholicSchoolsBQ.org for the latest updates. And to apply for a Catholic school scholarship or to make a donation, go to futuresineducation.org. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.